So here we go again. Barbara Lee lost her race for Democratic Caucus Chair. Now, many of us wanted Barbara Lee to be Speaker of the House for obvious reasons. She has amazing foresight. She was one of the only people, if not the only person, to vote against the authorization for use of military force in Iraq and Afghanistan. She saw the permanent occupations coming from a mile away. And that was brave. That was at a time when everybody in the country had war fever. And she stood out like a sore thumb and said, no, not going to happen. Well, she didn't step up to run for Speaker, which already made me sad, but she did want to be Democratic Caucus Chair, but she was defeated. The final vote was 123 to 113. The guy who won is this gentleman here, Hakeem Jeffries. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, okay, Hakeem Jeffries is not an enemy. You know, he is also in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, so hey, I guess it's overall a win. This is what people are saying. Now, let's understand that the Congressional Progressive Caucus, they're not all that progressive. And this is why you've heard me talk about the fact that we need a Justice Democrats caucus. You know, call it whatever you want. I don't care what you call it. You want to call it a Democratic Socialist Caucus? You want to call it, a Justice Democrats Caucus? You want to call it a left-wing caucus? I don't care. You call it whatever you want to call it. Bernie Crat Caucus, don't care. Don't care. But that would be the actual lefties. Because most of the people in the Congressional Progressive Caucus still take corporate PAC money. Kind of hard to say you're really that progressive if you buy into the corruption in the system. Now, but to be fair, hey, perhaps the voting record is progressive, even though they take corporate PAC money, and perhaps that's, not always an indicator. And it's true that that's not always an indicator of the voting record. Most of the time it is, but sometimes, you get some stray people who are really good, and they'll sound like Bernie Sanders, even though they might end up taking some corporate PAC money. Well, let's take a look. First, this is a passage from The Economist on this guy, Hakeem Jeffries. Mr. Jeffries is not a member of the moderate New Democrats faction, but he often sounds as if he should be. He is a fan of charter schools and fiscal rectitude. Though he supports the principle of universal health care coverage, he speaks of the importance of market forces and getting things done in a responsible fashion. Quoting Ronald Reagan approvingly, he suggests this means promoting a flourishing private sector outside the legitimate functions of government. The eternal quest to strike the right balance between the two is the American dream, he muses. Well, he called Bernie Sanders during the 2016 election, quote, a gun-loving socialist with zero foreign policy experience. He also said Bernie is not a, quote, true friend to blacks. He also said, running to the left in elections is, quote, overhyped and not electorally effective. And the final point, take a look at this. Only 1.3% of Hakeem Jeffries' money in the last election came from small dollar contributions. He was on MSNBC after, he got basically the position of Democratic Caucus Chair. And he was asked, about many different policy issues. And his repeated answer was, I'm a pragmatic progressive. He says he wants to, when it comes to healthcare, he wants to make sure that we expand on the Affordable Care Act and make sure people have protections for pre-existing conditions. This guy's not going to push for Medicare for all. This guy's not going to push for free college. This guy's not going to push to end the wars. And now he's the Democratic Caucus Chair. They're actively gaslighting the Bernie wing of the party. Which is why I've said from day one, there is a Democratic civil war. And I'm not here to play patty cakes with Nancy Pelosi and the corporatists in the party. I'm here to defeat the corporatists in the party. And this is something that should immediately light a fire under our asses for us to defeat the 123 turncoats in the Democratic Party. And to be fair, some of them aren't turncoats. They've just always been bad. But now we know. The good news about this is we now know what the breakdown is in Congress. We now know, okay, you got 123 bad Democrats and 113 good Democrats. So the upside of that, the positive view on this is, you go back, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the breakdown in the Democratic Party was way worse than that. You would only have maybe 15% of the Democrats were actual lefties. Now it's almost 50-50. So we're getting close, but we ain't there yet. And the bottom line is, all these 123 Democrats, unfortunately, we don't know specifically who they are yet, but all the Democrats who would support somebody like Hakeem Jeffries over Barbara Lee, those are all the people that we're going to have to primary, and we're going to have to beat, and we're going to have to get more involved, and we're going to have to push them in a more progressive direction. Because the bottom line is, these Democrats are not going to do it. I know that a lot of us like to think that, hey, politics is we cast a vote and then we go home and then years later we show up and cast another vote. No. Politics has to be, we're always on their ass. We're always making phone calls and telling them, if you don't vote this way, you're going to lose our support, and I got many people who will not vote for you if you don't do it. So we're going to have to keep pushing them. We're going to have to keep primarying them, and we're going to have to keep reasserting ourselves, because never be under any illusions about the Nancy Pelosi types. Of course, what they're going to do is they're going to gaslight you and say, oh, we agree with you, and then turn around and stab you in the back, and they're going to do it every single goddamn time. So it's time to fight back. And what I would say is, to all of the actual lefties in the House, whether it be Pramila Jayapal, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or Ilhan Omar, or Ro Khanna, who in many ways is the leader, all the actual lefties in the House, knuckle up. Because we're going to fight these people head on. Now, also, listen, let's not pretend like we're above Machiavellian politics, because they play Machiavellian politics, so play it right back at them. But bottom line is, politics is not the art of the compromise. What the Bernie wing of the party needs to understand is that politics is the art of leveraging the power of your respective office to get popular policy implemented for the people. So in other words, shouldn't be there to make friends and shake hands and smile with each other and have some coffee and talk shit. No, you're there to get Medicare for all for the people. You're there to get a living wage. You're there to end the wars. You're there to do a New Deal and end the drug war and do criminal justice reform and to fight for the people. And there are a little bit more than half of the Democratic Party in the House. They're gaslighters. They're like Hakeem Jeffries. So just know that they are that, and then work on your jujitsu so that ultimately we can defeat them. And as you guys work from within the party to actually do left-wing goals on the outside of the party, on the outside of Washington, D.C., we'll make sure that we're primarying all of the terrible Democrats, and we keep applying pressure to D.C. to do the right thing. Now, a lot of people, when they see a story like this, and I don't blame them for the initial feeling, because it's a perfectly rational response in the immediate aftermath of something like this happening. People think like, oh, why are we even bothering to try to reform from within the Democratic Party? Let's start a third party. And my response to that is, there are 0 Green Party members in Washington, D.C. 0 in the Senate, 0 in the House. How many governors are there that are Green Party members? 0. How many in state upper houses that are in the Green Party? 0. How many in state lower houses? 0. How many independents are in Washington, D.C.? A grand total of 2. Okay, what about some other... You know how many third parties there are in the U.S. at the federal level? 32. You know how many of those 32 parties have made it to Washington, D.C. or in Washington, D.C. right now? 0. Now, I'm not pointing this out to try to go after these third-party people, because the reality is we agree with them a lot on policy substance, so they're our allies more than anything else. But what I'm saying is, strategically, don't be a fool. We've never had a third party with a majority in Congress. We've never had a third party become president. George Washington was an independent, but that was before we had literal parties. So there were a few eras in U.S. politics where we had no parties. We didn't have a partisan system. But every time that we didn't have parties, we've always had 2 parties. It's the nature of our system. There's no proportional representation in this country. I wish there was. There's not. It's not a parliamentary system. I wish it was. It's not. It's a winner-take-all system. That means it is structured to have two parties. Now, again, I wish that wasn't true, but anybody who's telling you we need to go the third-party route without giving you a detailed plan as to how you even get ballot access is full of shit. I need everybody to understand that. I'm talking about rigid, hardcore, empirical truths in one election cycle. One election cycle. Justice Democrats now surpass the number of independents, Green Party members, and all other third parties combined. We have 7 Justice Democrats in Washington, D.C. now, but overall the picture is even better than that because there's 13 people from one of the leftist groups, whether it be Our Revolution, DSA, PCCC, Justice Democrats. So in one election cycle. Why? Because our strategy is correct. Nobody wants to be in one of the major two parties. Are you fucking kidding me? It's about as edgy as using a plastic knife on a steel beam. Nobody wants to do what we're doing in terms of taking over a major party. Who the fuck wants to say on one of these two major parties that are hated in the United States of America? Nobody wants to say that. We're doing it because we have no fucking choice. That's why we're doing it. So every time we see a story like this, and our initial reaction is we want to take our ball and go home or overturn the fucking game board, the reaction has to be the polar opposite of it. Ah, fuck, we lost this one. Time to fight twice as hard. Time to fight 3 times as hard. Time to fight 4 times as hard because we have to win this democratic civil war. There is a democratic civil war. And the way we win it is to fight. Not to say, fuck this, let's check out of the system, let's get apolitical, let's do something that's not going to work. Again, I will stand in solidarity with anybody who agrees with me on the policies. But that doesn't mean that empirical reality isn't empirical reality, and that doesn't mean that certain ideas are way better strategically than other ideas. So let's keep all that in mind. And let's keep fighting, and let's win, because we're going to have a lot more setbacks like this. But just remember, we're also making giant gains. There were 4 people who didn't take corporate PAC money. Now there's 40. We have a literal Medicare for All caucus now in Congress. That was unheard of 5 years ago. Now we have it. Why? Because of all the hard work activists are doing on the ground, all the hard work of all these groups. So there's going to be some setback, and they're going to keep spitting in our eye, but that just means we get more involved, and we primary every single son of a bitch who's been gaslighting us from day one.